Welcome to the Crocodile School podcast with Hylke Faber, transformational coach and founder of Growth Leaders Network, an award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and Carson Heady, best-selling author of Salesman on Fire and sales director at Microsoft, as they explore together how we stay connected to and lead from our best selves. Where do we find the wherewithal to choose again and respond from our best selves, instead of giving into fear-based reactivity, especially when challenged? How do we tame our crocodiles, those fear-driven voices that want to protect our ego at all cost? How do we become what we would like the world to become? Allow yourself to become present and enjoy this episode of the Crocodile School podcast.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Hylke.
Hi,
And welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Crocodile School podcast. Really excited about this episode 2, because today we're going to explore cultivating a growth attitude, which is based on chapter 1 from Taming Your Crocodiles by my friend Hylke Faber. My name's Carson Heady, and I'm here with Hylke today. Hylke, how are you?
I'm really well and really appreciative to have this time to spend with you and with everybody else who is listening, to spend some time with ourselves and saying, okay, what am I about? What would I like to be growing into today? Yeah.
Well said. We're all on a growth journey, and I love how you frame this up as an attitude of growth and cultivating an attitude of growth. I know myself that growth can come from a variety of different sources and places, some of them very unexpected, like failure as an example. But today we're going to talk about that. How do we do this? How do we find this capacity to learn, being aware of how we can learn and how we don't learn? So I want to jump right in. And what, in your view, Hylke, is core about maintaining an attitude of growth?
Well, to me, it starts with finding the decision, to the willingness to grow. And that is not something that is imposed on us, although our societal conditioning has a lot of actually helpful hints, like, hey, you need to go to school, learn a language, learn skills. There's a lot of things set up in our society, even if you're living just raw in nature, that would propel you to growth just to survive, right? You need to figure out where to get your food, how to get along with people, how to make something out of life, how to maybe find some pleasure, might find some meaning. So there's a lot of motivating factors. And then when we step back, what I find is there is this deep innate call inside of ourselves to grow. Like, I think about what happens when we see a picture, a group picture, and we are in it. So, what's the person that we're looking at first? Carson. Well, who's that? It's ourselves. So we have that. I think usually, maybe it's our children, but usually it's ourselves, something to do with us. And so we have this inborn fascination, you could say, with what we are. And there's something beautiful about that, which is there's a certain reverence that we have inbuilt in ourselves to make the best out of what we are. Like, think about when we come here as babies, like that's an intrinsic impulse that our parents have for us. They want the best for us. They see this precious bit of life, and we get to shepherd that precious bit of life our whole life long. And as, of course, we grow up, there's all kinds of other motivations that our nervous system, especially our reptilian system, puts into place, that you could say are sometimes helpful because we also need to survive, but also can distract us from this primary orientation. So to me, cultivating a growth attitude very much starts with finding within ourselves the objective, the priority to say, yes, I am going to make the best out of what I am. And that includes growing. And in our last podcast, I think we talked a little bit about this quote from Michelangelo, which I still love. Michelangelo was asked, how do you make this beautiful statue, which later was called David? And he responded, I saw an angel in the stone and I carved to set it free. Similarly, I think each of us, whether we are a leader in a business, whether we are a parent, whether we are single, whether we're individual contributor, whether we're traveling somewhere, we're always with ourselves. And when we recognize the angel in ourselves, we can't help but want to take good care of it and uncover it like a beautiful treasure. So to me, this beginning of the growth journey is all about making that a priority, choosing that.
I love that. I think first off, growth is an evolution. It's a journey. It rarely, if ever, looks like what we anticipate it's going to look like. We think we know what we want to become or turn into, but a lot of the key lessons that we find along the way, may happen because of something that happened that was unexpected or something that happened that was considered a failure. I always love pulling, nuggets. I'm a big book highlighter.
Yes.
And one of the quotes that I pulled out of chapter 1 that really resonated with me was, afraid of judgment, if we try and fail, we look the other way from our growth opportunities. And that's why I think it's so important to have that foundational piece, cultivating, nurturing an attitude of growth. But that begets my next question for you is, what do you feel gets in the way of our growth?
Yeah, you've hit it, I think, with that quote, which is fear. Fear of losing control, fear of losing the image that we have of what we should be. And there's this other beautiful saying by a German poet, Rainer Maria Rilke. He says, take a step outside of the house you know so well. Enormous space is near. And that to me says, basically in one sentence, what growth is about. And we all know about the comfort zone and then the growth zone. It's like we're so tempted to stay in what we know, and we have fear about what we don't know. And then the next thing that often happens when we're afraid is we start judging it as bad, as bad for us, or we won't be able to handle it, or whatever it is. And I'll give you an example of this. Like yesterday, I was in a meeting with a client, and the client said something that I disagreed with. And before I knew it, I said, I see no value in that. And inside of me, I felt a contraction. It's like, oh, Hylke, what did you just say? Is that really true? And I realized in that moment that I was caught, and my fear set in, right? Like, because I have this image of what I should be with that client. And my ego image is I should be this all-knowing coach who is always wise, always has it together, and all this stuff, right? Kind of a spiritual phony, if you ask me. But in that moment, I felt it, right? And my fear of that image being tarnished had me want to not grow in that moment. In other words, dig in and basically find arguments why what I said, this has no value, was the right thing to say. Instead, thanks to this work that I've been practicing for so long and so many teachers have been helping me, I found this other inner voice that basically said, Hylke, look again. Is that true? And then there was something in me that was like, okay, well, what if you just accepted yourself? Yes, you made a boo-boo here. You can accept yourself. You can love yourself. So you can get out of that judgmental, fear-based contraction. And I laughed. Something came out, like as soon as I did that, I started to laugh and inside of myself. And I said, I'm so sorry. Let's call him John. I'm going to retract that statement. I was totally being snarky with you and I didn't mean to be. Let's talk about what you had in mind and let me actually listen this time. So that was a moment of growth. And if I think about that in the arc of my growth journey, that has been a big theme, to be able to unlearn judgment and learn kindness.
It is all fear based. I think a lot of times we don't want to make the wrong move. We don't want to be seen as something that we don't want to be seen as. We don't want to fail. We don't want to put ourselves out there, and that inhibits us from doing a lot of the things that would unlock our best selves. You talk a lot about whispers as a core ingredient of growth, and I want to jump into that topic. How do you work with whispers as a leader, and what does that mean for our audience?
So the word whispers was taught to me by other facilitators who gave me this quote from the Cherokees, which say, listen to the whispers so you don't have to hear the screams. Listen to the whispers so you don't have to hear the screams. So to me, the whispers are these little voices inside of us in our life that are like very gentle carvers, and that say, no, no, this way, let that go. That may not be what you need to be saying right now. This may not be the right orientation. This may be an opportunity for you to let go and to grow into something that is more like you. Like if you think about what happened yesterday with that client, my screaming inside ego voice was like, I'm gonna prove them that I'm right. And the whisper, which is much more gentle, said, well, what's really true here? Let's get real. And I was totally coming from my ego, so it allowed me to shift. And I think that's what whispers do. And then they say, so you don't have to hear the screams and screams of life. Like, let's imagine in that meeting that I had continued to make the client wrong. A possibility would have been that client would have said, okay, Hylke, you're fired. Right? That would have been a scream, because I would have had to deal with that as I would have chosen eventually to look at it as a growth opportunity. And so I would have said, what can I learn from this? Maybe that awareness would have come a little later. But if we can catch it as a whisper, the consequences are usually more benign.
There's another quote in chapter 1 where you say, think of the whispers in your life that you have made irrelevant, maybe because you thought it wasn't the right time to stop your momentum, or because you dismissed the person telling you, or because you were afraid of the changes that it would require. It's very human to want to dismiss the whispers, and yet for us to grow, we must find the courage to open our ears and listen. This resonated a great deal for me for a multitude of reasons. One being a whisper that I've ignored for a long time around like mismanagement of prioritization of my scheduling, being pulled in a lot of different directions. And you want to address that whisper before it reaches fever pitch. And you're pulled in a lot of different directions. You're burnt out. You're ineffective. You're not your best self. You can't be because of what you've allowed yourself to get into. That's why you have to address these whispers as they come up. And as you realize that there's areas in your life and in your career and in your work that have to be addressed differently. A lot of times I ask myself and I ask others that I coach and lead and train and mentor, are you satisfied with the current status or results of whatever it is that you feel challenged with, or the trajectory that you're on right now? Because if you're not, why are we so afraid to risk what makes us unhappy?
Yes.
And so I think that often has enabled me, when I put it into that perspective for myself, that has enabled me to say, look, what do I have to lose? The worst case scenario, to your point, I do something a little bit differently. I uncover or flex some new muscle. And the worst case scenario is that something that already wasn't going satisfactorily for me continues to do so. But the best case scenario is it unlocks new skills, new relationships, new abilities. Got one more thing I wanted to jump into just right before we take a quick break. But you also talk a lot about self-compassion and forgiveness. We have to give ourselves grace throughout this process. And I'd love for you to spend a minute or so on that.
Yeah, that to me, besides choice, is maybe the core ingredient. I was thinking about this conversation this morning, and I sat down to meditate. And to me, this sense of grace and forgiveness and compassion comes very much online when I'm still. So there is a sense of, like, when I sit down, I like to sort of sit up straight, like this firm back. So I go on the balcony of myself, you could say, right? So there's that choice, there's the firmness. But then if I harden up, in other words, if I give in to my judgment, like, oh, I have these thoughts, like I may feel some nervousness, or I don't know what's going to happen, or I got to think about this, or the garden, or whatever, stuff, right? If I start to judge myself for the stuff that happens in my mind stream, I stay stuck in it, right? Because I get involved in it. But when I'm able to not only let it go, but sort of have some compassion towards myself, and dare I say, love myself. And my teacher always asks me on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you love yourself unconditionally? Now that can become another judgmental exercise, right? Oh, I'm 7. Darn, So even though I love myself at 7, I love myself unconditionally. There's like this. So in this sense of taking a balcony perspective, when we do that and we choose to grow, to be able to keep growing, we require self-compassion. Otherwise, we get stuck, guaranteed, in some cul-de-sac of judgment. Like, again, case in point, meeting yesterday, right? Had I said I would stay stuck in judgment, I would have tried to make what I thought was wrong right by arguing, digging myself in deeper. That's often what happens when we fall prey to our own judgment, as opposed to, just like in meditation, take a balcony seat, sit, watch the discomfort, and love myself, and love and be compassionate to others. And the sense of compassion is also about understanding that, or appreciating that, this body mind that I'm stewarding has had a lot of experiences, right? And when I look on the news, for example, our world's not exactly a compassionate place on average, at least not what the news tells me. So my body mind and our body mind has had tons of experiences in judging others. So that's why I think self-compassion is so important.
I like that. I think it's so important that we give ourselves the space and grace to do it different, to do it better, because that's the only way that it will happen. And like I always say, very similarly, like the balcony view, take a step back, take a holistic view of your life. What are the areas where you want to get stronger? What are the areas where you want to grow? And what's going to be required to do it? Who are the key relationships that you're going to need in order to be able to do that? Is it a mentor relationship? Is it new potential client relationships? Is it colleagues that you can reach out to for advice, for better practices, things of that nature? And then giving yourself the commitment to actually follow through, instead of going back quickly, as we often do, to comfortable ways of mediocrity or comfortable ways of unsatisfactory results. This has been great. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and dive into some practical application.
You are listening to the Crocodile School podcast, where we are exploring connecting deeply to our true selves, especially when challenged. If you would like to learn more about leadership and team connectedness and taming the crocodiles that get in the way of leading from our true selves, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now back to the Crocodile School podcast with your hosts, Hylke Faber and Carson B. Heady.
So there we are, Carson, making it practical.
That's right. So this is where it gets real. It got very real for me last time, so I'm sure it's going to get the same way this time. So, I typically, as we're going to do in these sessions, I'm going to bring something real that I'm grappling with, that I know other leaders are grappling with within their careers. And, so what I wanted to bring today was a challenge that I'm facing in cultivating an attitude growth. One of the key challenges that I've faced in my career is continually needing to pivot and evolve and adapt and reinvent myself. And I've found success by being very resourceful, being resilient through setbacks, based on my strengths. Building community and delivering value. But I think where I struggle, Hylke, is that often, I realized long ago that when I had an epiphany when I realized I did not need to be the smartest person in the room, which is good. And then I started really building a lot of core relationships from a mentorship standpoint and learning a lot from colleagues. But where I struggle is, do I focus and double down on the areas where I'm strong, that muscle that's already developed, and, focus on my strengths? Or how much time should I spend looking at my blind spots, like becoming better at industry knowledge or, technical expertise or whatever it is? We all have those areas where we know there are weaknesses, we know there are blind spots, but I have quite a daunting task of figuring out, where do I invest my time and energy when I don't have a ton of it left? We're busy, we're pulled in a lot of different directions. So do I focus on strengths, focus on weaknesses, a mix of both? What do you suggest?
Excellent. So I hear the challenge is really, where do I focus my growth, right? So life is a very generous teacher, you could say, right? It gives us always exactly what we need, even if it's not what we want. In other words, it's always an opening to learning, if we want to see it that way. It doesn't have to be that way, but we can see it that way, right? So going back to the whispers, Carson, what is an area of your life where your whispers are saying, if you really let your intuition speak and let the rational mind just rest a little bit, let the rational mind be more a servant, and the intuition and the heart more be the conductor? Now, what does the heart say about what you really would like to grow into? Or conversely, and this may be the same thing, that you may have some fear to even explore a touch?
Yeah. What I'm most passionate about is leveraging the things that I have developed strength in to deliver success for others, to serve. Even just being on something like this with you, right? Identifying an area where I've developed community and been really fortunate to develop a following. How can I be a conduit to the amazing work that you're doing so that more people are exposed to it? So I feel like my knee-jerk reaction is to say, I want to double down on those areas of strength and see how can they best be replicated to serve as many people as possible. Then on the flip side, I've got some of those other whispers that say, oh, you need to get better at these certain components of your understanding of your job, or in the areas maybe that I haven't had as strong, of a presence in, like technical acumen or just deep industry knowledge. And there's ways to pursue that and do that. But I feel like if I spread myself thin, and I kind of scatter myself across both, I develop, I'm maybe doing a halfway competent job in all of it, right? I'm not doing as much as I want to do of the things that I'm passionate about and I love, and I'm not learning as much to become dangerous in some of these other areas where I'm currently not.
Okay, all right. So I'm hearing that part of your challenge is actually how to learn to choose, to really learn to choose.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. So that may actually be what is part of what you're going to be learning about, like learning to choose. So what fear do you encounter when you make a choice about something that's really true for you? You want to say, because something deep down knows what Carson really wants, where your bliss is, what you really want to do with this life. Something in you knows that. You know what that is, and you don't have to say it here, but you know it. And then what's the other part in you that says, no, you can't choose that, because then what happens? So what's the fear?
I think there's multiple. Part of it's fear of missing out on, opportunities to collaborate or to, and, we've talked obviously outside of these sessions. One of my biggest fears is that I'm not having or, pursuing some of the conversations or the opportunities that I get because it detracts. It takes me away from other things that I need to be doing or want to be doing. So I usually say yes to a lot of opportunities because I've become very fortunate in my position and in my status in the sales leadership community. I get asked to do a ton of stuff, and I tend to say yes to all of it because I love the relationship. I love the ability to contribute. And so I think the biggest fear for me is fear of missing out on some of those types of opportunities. I have a fear about creating the right, am I creating the right relationships and blueprints? Sometimes I don't know who to kind of go to be mentored on where I ultimately want to go and what I want to be doing. And sometimes I'm not even sure what that is. I get a lot of opportunities in the sales leadership community to speak and present and do podcasts and things of that nature that, I don't want to turn any of those types of things away, but I also love what I do every day. I'm a field practitioner. I'm in the field leading a team. I love all of it. And so it's hard to let any of it go.
So let's do the I, we, it whisper practice on that then.
Sure.
Right? Which is, what's the impact of you not making choices and saying yes to everything? What's the impact on you, on the I?
Exhaustion.
And
Yeah,
do you think it's going to get better or worse?
It minimizes effectiveness and it completely exhausts me.
It exhausts. What do you think is the impact in your relationships?
Yeah.
Because the Dr. Phil question, how is that working for you, not making a choice?
Some days better than others. Some days, I'm flying high. I guess it all depends on what day of the week it is and how much caffeine I've had. But no, it's some days are better than others. Some days I can fly high and do it all. I get asked all the time, like, when do you sleep? Which is funny to chuckle at sometimes, but the reality is some days it is not as easy as I try to make it appear.
Of course it is. And so there's a cost on the I, on the we. So far it's going okay. And how about your effectiveness? What's the impact on your effectiveness?
I probably, and look, my 100% is usually pretty good. So even if I'm running at like 80% of capacity, people probably don't know it. But I feel it. I know that I'm not able to give to, as much as I want in each of these individual pockets and to people.
So see, life is giving you feedback.
Yeah.
Of the cost of not making choices for you is that you are not able to take care of yourself as you would like, and also not able to take care of all these things that you're taking on, right?
And not growing in the process.
Right. And so
a lot of standing still in a lot of areas.
And so what is your underlying growth opportunity here? What is that?
Here's an opportunity to make better choices, to make choices that prioritize the growth that I identify that I want to have.
Yes, to prioritize growth and to face the fear of missing out, right? Because who would you be without because it's just in your brain, in your mind, that you could miss out, So who would you be without this fear of missing out?
Probably a lot more effective. I'd be a lot more selective in what I do. I would be able to delegate more.
Yes.
So and I'd have more time. I have more time to invest in valuable growth pursuits.
Right. So there's a sense of self-sovereignty that comes online when you let go of stuff that's not yours, because you learn somewhere that you should not miss out, right? So just to conclude this mini coaching conversation, the question of what should I grow into? There is you could say a professional angle to that, which is, hey, you might want to learn accounting or a language or management or how to run a meeting. You will know how to make those choices. You can prioritize that. The level at which we're working here on growth is, what's the growth that you need for your essence to grow more into your truth? You could say into your soul truth, what is true about you, your brilliance, your power, your empowerment. These are two different questions and they have different answers, but they inform each other. You see how that works? Because the more focused you are on staying true to your true self, you also will make different choices in the professional realm.
Very well said. No, I know we're coming up on time here, and I want to share a key takeaway, and then I'd love to hear yours. My core takeaway for this session is that balcony view. How can I take a step back and prioritize taking a step back and looking at that holistic view of everything that I'm about? My brand, my reputation, the perception of me as a leader or as a contributor, or even into my personal life, right? Am I nurturing the relationships that matter in the way that matters most? And am I finding those ways to serve? And if I were to find more ways to grow and serve, what would that look like in an ideal way? I've got to give myself the time, the patience, the grace to unlock that, and then also develop a plan to do it and commit to it.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I echo the balcony perspective, the sense of taking the time to take care of this precious bit of life that is you and it is us, and asking, what is this really about, and how is it really called to be of service and express itself? And however that is, I'm going to follow that. And that involves a lot of unlearning of the voices that we've picked up along the way. Like, for example, mine of having to always be the wise one. That's a bunch of nonsense. Or yours of, I have to never miss out. Thank you.
Very good. Any last thoughts you want to share before I take us out?
I would say, if you've been listening, I invite you to think about this question. Like, what is my priority for my growth? Like, how will I take the best care possible of this bit of life that I am? Like, how do I choose to nurture that? And how can I do that with a lot of care and compassion?
Powerfully said. One of the things at the end of the chapter, or each chapter, is the field work, and really helps us to digest and to reflect on, what are whispers saying in our lives? What are our biggest growth opportunities? So definitely recommend everyone checking out Taming Your Crocodiles. Gives you a lot of thought-provoking ways to not only create and uncover, but define that attitude of growth. So thank you for joining the Crocodile School podcast today. Next time, we're going to dive into chapter 2. Please join us next month. We do these final Tuesdays of the month for the Crocodile School podcast. You can also join us for a Growth Leaders Network community conversation that we're going to be setting up. And then be sure to follow the Growth Leaders Network page for more information. Thanks again for joining Hylke and me today. Hylke, thanks for being with me. Great discussion as always. And take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining the Crocodile School podcast with your hosts Hylke Faber and Carson V. Heady. Take a moment to pause and appreciate something about yourself. And enjoy taming your crocodiles, growing more and more into your true potential. See you next time at the Crocodile School.